Hello YouTube community, my name is Jesse and I'm here to give you a comic book review, follow-up comic book to my previous review of Death of Superman. So this one will be the immediate follow-up. This is called Superman, no, A World Without Superman. A World Without a Superman. Okay, so this book immediately picks up where the last one left off. It is a 12-part story which combines the story arc Funeral for a Friend and some of Legacy of Superman. Okay, so those two together make up this trade paperback. Like I said, 12 parts, 12 issues it covers, all the major Superman titles, and a little bit of JLA title throw in there. But basically it's the story of the immediate aftermath and the funeral of Superman. So a lot of things are going on throughout this one. We have all kinds of like subplots and dramatizations. Basically the focus of the book, well, there isn't really a focus of the book. That's my whole point. It's very scattered, very busy. A whole lot of characters are popping in and out. A bunch of insignificant characters that, you know, they don't really have much of a plot point other than they're just there, another person dealing with the drama of Superman's death. And the whole thing is to show that there's multiple ways that people deal with his death. Some people are sad, some people feel guilty, some people feel angry. Lex Luthor, for instance, Lex Luthor II, which is basically Lex Luthor the First. Somehow he was regenerated. I don't know exactly how. I'm going to say regenerated, not reborn. But anyway, he claims to be the son of Lex Luthor. He's got this bright red hair and red facial hair all over. It looks ridiculous, but anyway, he claims to be the son of Lex Luthor. He's really the original Lex Luthor, having been regenerated somehow. But I don't want to get into that too much. But he feels bitter about Superman's death because he wanted to be the one that killed Superman. And now that has been taken from him, so he's kind of like struggling with his meaning or his purpose for life. So he takes on this role of becoming like a public figure, a public authority, especially when it comes to Superman. He takes the initiative to pay for the memorial service, the funeral service, the burial, the tomb, and he even makes a secret entrance to the tomb, you know, just in case anything happens. And he has monitors and stuff set up. And that becomes important later on in the story. But anyway, my point right now is that Lex Luthor feels bitter, bitter, and kind of jealous. Lois Lane, of course, is very sad, heartbroken. Same with his parents, Clark Kent's parents. So they need each other. They ended up coming together. And also along with Clark Kent's high school sweetheart, who also knew his secret identity, Lana Lang. They get together and they all decide that no matter what, they're going to keep the identity of Clark Kent a secret. They're not going to let the world know that Clark Kent was Superman. To me, that's kind of a jealous thing to do. It doesn't really make any sense because, you know, private investigators are going to find out eventually. So you're just kind of lying to the whole world about that. I think the world kind of has a right to know. But anyways, so they decided to keep it a secret for as long as they can. Meanwhile, Clark Kent is missing, but we all know the truth that Clark Kent was Superman, so therefore he's dead. The way they get around that is by saying that there were a whole bunch of people that were buried underneath the rubble and the debris of the fight between Superman and Doomsday. So Clark Kent happens to be one of those people. He's been missing for a long time, but so is a lot of other people are missing. But it's just like, at what point do you have the funeral for Clark Kent? At what point do you announce Clark Kent is dead? Okay, you've been searching for him for how many weeks now, and you still haven't found him. It's time to say he's dead. But that didn't happen in this book. A lot of weird things started happening. A lot of subplots, like I said, with minor characters, oddball characters. I'm going to name them. There's Professor Hamilton and Bibblewowski. You know, Bibblewowski's like this comic relief character, sort of. He's like a big, thuggish brute with a good heart, and he keeps saying Superman was my favorite. That's his whole thing. So he feels like, it's important for him to step up and really shine during this time. So he puts on a good act. And then you've got other oddball characters like the Guardian, who's really Jim Harper, the clone of Jim Harper. And he's part of Cadmus, which also includes this alien called Duvex, who can read people's minds. Just a whole bunch of oddball characters. And you've got Dan Turpin, who's like a private investigator, and Maggie Sawyer, who's like in charge of the Special Forces unit, and they're local law enforcement, and they investigate. Well, first of all, they try to prevent this guy called Agent Westfield from taking the Superman and Doomsday's body. So there's that. There's a lot of oddball characters, so many oddball characters. It gets really confusing. Instead of having them focus more on Lois Lane and Clark Kent's parents, it focuses too much on the oddball characters, and it just skips back and forth a lot. I didn't like that. If they continue dwelling on all the melodrama between Lois Lane and Clark Kent's parents, yes, that would get tedious. Yes, that would get kind of sickening after a certain point. But all this oddball stuff going on with these weird characters in and out, I just think it's too distracting. Yes, there needs to be a side story, there needs to be a subplot, but it should have been better. Instead, what we get, Jimmy Olsen, he's an important supporting character, one of the most important. But the only thing about Jimmy Olsen, like in this, all he does is sell the photos of Superman's dead body, and it makes like front page news and goes into TV syndication. But he feels kind of guilty about selling those photos. At the same time, he's sad about the death of Superman and the disappearance of his best friend Clark Kent. But Jimmy isn't included in like the Lois Lane group, the get together between her and Clark's parents. And there's this one story where Jimmy and Bibblewowski find this kid who feels guilty about Superman. He feels responsible for Superman's death because he was the boy that was begging Superman to save him during the fight with Doomsday. Doomsday destroyed his home with his mother and his baby sister, and so they were caught in a fire. They were probably going to die. Superman stopped fighting Doomsday to come save them, and he felt like, oh, that's his responsibility. He's guilty for that. If he hadn't done that, then Superman would have been able to, I guess, finish off Doomsday or something. It's really stupid. But Jimmy Olsen and Bill Wowski find him on New Year's Eve, and they buy him dinner, and Bill Wowski pays for his bus ticket home. So you have that, which is kind of heartwarming, especially for like a Christmas Eve story, which is what it was. But at the same time, I think they could have done something better. For instance, what people really wanted to know was what was going to happen with the Superman body and the Doomsday body. The Superman body ends up being obviously buried and put in the tomb. But the Doomsday body, we don't really know what happens to it until much later on. So I felt that they could have done better with that. They should have done more of a follow-up on Doomsday. Unfortunately, we won't know anything about that until the next book, so you have to get through all of this information before you find out what happens to Doomsday. Okay, and so there's that. There's also a whole lot going on with Clark Kent's parents. After they buried Superman, the guy that tried to take Superman's body in the first place, his name is Agent Westfield. He had federal authorization to take into custody and for the sake of doing research, any bodies from outer space, any alien bodies. He had that authorization, so he tried to step in and take Superman Doomsday's body, and local law enforcement, Dan Turpin, interfered, and then the president declared Superman as an American citizen. So basically, the president overrode that authority by Westfield and said, no, Westfield, you do not have the right to claim the bodies. So later on, Westfield comes back, drills into the tomb, steals Superman's body, takes it back to the lab called Cadmus, and his excuse is that, well, what the president really meant is that for right now, I don't have authority to take the body, not until after they bury it. He didn't say, the president didn't say I couldn't have the body after the burial. So that's his excuse or reason, if you will. So he takes the body for the purpose that he announces that he wants to try and clone it. And the people at Cadmus, at first they're against, they're like, why did you take the body? And once he says he wants to clone it, then they're kind of like, oh, okay, all right then. But at the same time, Lois Lane and Lex Luthor, they find out that the body's been stolen, and they go on, on a frenzy to try and get it back. And they find out that, obviously it was Westfield who tried to take the body back. So they track him down. They find the body, and they find the body, and Supergirl helps them take it back. So they put the body back in the tomb. So we assume that Westfield was not able to clone the body. But later on in the story, the body turns up missing again. So, this time we find out not till the next book that we find out what happened there. But nevertheless, another major point of this book is that Clark Kent's father, once he finds out that, he reads the newspaper and he finds out that people stole Superman's body, he has a heart attack. And while he's in the hospital, he's having these, he's having these dreams, sort of, or it's going on, it's going on in his mind, but he's trying to save his son, Superman, from basically the Grim Reapers. Superman sees them as Kryptonians just trying to take him to his proper resting place, but Jonathan Kent, Clark Kent's father, actually sees them for what they are, which are Grim Reapers. So he tries to convince his son to come with him instead, and in doing that successfully, he brings himself back to life, so to speak, because he was flatlining. You know, his heart rate was gone, he was flatlining, and he was going to die. But after that whole thing completes inside his mind, he saves his son. That sort of brings him back to life, so his heartbeat is restored, and he goes back to living on the farm. I thought that was pretty good, except they got really far off on a tangent with Jonathan Kent remembering when he was in the army or some type of military, and I felt like that was really, really distracting. So if they had excluded that part, it would have been much better. And then the whole thing with Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, and Supergirl trying to track down Superman's body, it got really weird, where they were just encountering all sorts of people that were trying to help them get the body back, and they would get on top of snowmobiles, it seemed like, and she was wearing scuba diving gear at some point, and it was crazy. But if they had omitted or changed all of that, it would have been much better. But there's a whole lot of material here for a movie, but in order to adapt it successfully for a movie, it would have to be just so much of it, so much of the material would have to be either completely discarded or completely reimagined. So I can't give this book a very high rating at all because the distractions. So yeah, I'm gonna say 5.5 out of 10 for Superman, or A World Without Superman. So there you have. There's my review of A World Without Superman. Thank you for watching. See you next time.